Hi, I'm Xavier, a student at Scotch College.
Hi, I'm Adil, Cader, founder and host of the Talking Foreign Affairs podcast.
Hi, I'm Nikki, a student at PLC.
Firstly, we will thank you for being here. It's absolutely phenomenal and what must be a busy schedule as the chairperson of the ABC. And we're happy to announce that we have Adil Cader as a special guest on today's podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
Additionally, joining us on this podcast is Ita Buttrose, an Australian icon who has made a great impact on media, journalism, and the national broadcaster. Ita Buttrose left school at the age of 15 to pursue her interest in journalism, landing her first job in the Australian Women's Weekly magazine and later working as a reporter and then a women's editor on the Daily Telegraph. Ida's journey from her early beginnings to becoming a media powerhouse has been marked by breaking barriers and pushing boundaries.
As an editor, advocate, and leader, she has left an incredible mark on the realms of journalism, healthcare advocacy, and women's empowerment. With a career spanning decades and a legacy that continues to inspire, Ita Buttrose is a true symbol of innovation and leadership. Pleasure to have you here with us today, Ita.
It's very lovely to be with you all.
We hope to go over her reflections on her career as well as thoughts on the ABC, and today we will have Adil start with his questions.
So Ita, you've had a lot of success in your career. What do you attribute that to?
Hard work, quite frankly. Hard work, determination, curiosity, and my ambition. You know, I wanted to go as far as I could.
You left school at the age of 15. Just explain what that journey was like, having to leave school so early and with such an uncertain road, how you kind of went about to carving your career.
Well, when I left school at 15, a girl's education wasn't considered all that important. And, you know, I'm not whinging about my lot. It was just the way that it was for girls, because it was assumed that we would get married and have children and that we didn't have to work. We'd be at home running the house. Well, I did get married and I did have children. I just didn't go home. And so my first job was at the Women's Weekly, as you've said, as a copy girl, which meant that's about as low as you can start in my profession. So that meant that I ran messages and made tea and coffee for 40 people in the morning and the afternoon. One of the advantages of starting really low down the ladder is that when you get to the top of the ladder, you understand better the frustrations and the fears of people lower down the ladder. So it's a knowledge that's quite useful to you later in your career. And it didn't take them long at the Women's Weekly to discover that I could type and do shorthand, which was a requirement. Most girls did that in those days, because my mother thought I needed to have some skills. And so when they learned that I could type and do shorthand, well, then I was taken out of the copy girl room and given things to, you know, a medical report to type up or whatever. And then I applied for a cadetship. And I used to come in on the mornings, on my days off, and go out with senior journalists on assignments, because I wanted to learn as much as possible about being a journalist. And I think I really wore the women's editor out with my enthusiasm. And I got a cadetship when I was 16. And I was on my way then. I got a cadetship on the women's pages of the Daily and Sunday Telegraphs here in Sydney. And it was the beginning of a career that I have never regretted. I was 11 when I decided I wanted to become a journalist, and all the good things that have happened to me in my career have been through journalism.
So you spoke about your time with the Weekly, and you were also the youngest editor of the Weekly. What was that experience like, and some of your biggest learnings?
Well, I was only 33 when I became editor of the Women's Weekly, and I had launched successfully a magazine called Clio for the same company, for Sir Frank Packer. And so I had some rungs on the board, but the Women's Weekly back then, when I was appointed editor, was the per capita population was the largest circulating magazine in the world. And so it used to sell on average 860 to 900,000 copies every week. And that's a phenomenal circulation. And it went into 1 in 4 homes in Australia. It had a lot of power, the Weekly. And so I remember thinking how old some of the people on the Women's Weekly were. They were in their 50s and 60s. And to my 33 years, that seemed old. But I realized now they weren't old at all. I've changed completely. But I think the important thing to remember when you're young and you do get a key position like this is to respect everybody. So we didn't call each other by our first names then. I mean, all these older people were Mrs. Keep, Miss Bowden, Mr. Hughes. So I went around to each of them and said, now that I had been appointed editor, would it be all right if I called them by their first name? And I think I showed them that I respected them. And I think when you're in any leadership role, you have to value the human capital of the people you employ. We leaders often don't, but the human capital of your business is vital to your success. So it's important that they come along with you on whatever ride you're going to take them. And as far as the weekly was concerned, I had been sent to change it. I'd been sent to modernize it. I'd been sent to change its size. It was originally a tabloid, and there was a paper shortage, a world paper shortage. So I reduced it down to the size, what we call standard size, the size most magazines are. And these were very significant changes for a magazine that occupied a very respected place in the Australian community. But they worked, thank heavens, they worked. And the staff could see that the changes I talked about worked not only to their benefit, but also to the magazine's future success.
Some really good points you make about the respect and the way you address people, calling them sir or Mr. or madam. It's a subject nowadays we actually don't talk too much about. You talked about working with Sir Frank Packer, and you also work with his son, Kerry Packer, and this is a question I'm really passionate about. I've seen the ABC documentary about yourself, Australian Story. I've seen the How's That series, all those things, looking back at that period in the 70s and the 80s. To our younger audience, can you just explain to us how transformational was that period working with Kerry Packer, the World Series cricket, especially the Come On Aussie Come On, which even today, that invention of the sport, how it's impacted Australian society today, working with Mojo, with the marketing. How did that period and how does it feel being in that time which transformed Australian society to what it is now?
Well, Kerry Packer was a very exciting man to work for. He was an entrepreneur, really. And so World Series cricket took the cricket world by storm. But first of all, there were 5 key executives that worked for Mr. Packer, and I was one of them. So I ran a significant part of the publishing empire. So he talked to each of the 5 executive leaders around him and told us why he really wanted World Series cricket to work, what it meant for the business, what it meant, the risk we were taking, because it was a risk. It might have failed. And so it was a very big risk. And then with us all committed, wanting to make this work as much as he did, we set off to transform cricket. And that's what happened with World Series cricket. It transformed the game. It gave it a new lease on life. The cricketers wore coloured uniforms. The one-day cricket happened, night cricket happened. And it's very exciting when you're witnessing that kind of change and it's working really well. But the thing about change, and we live in constantly changing times, which is uncertain for most people and frightens most people, change represents opportunities. If you think of change as an opportunity, you'll deal with it a lot better. But when change of this significance happens and it works, it's very exciting. I mean, can I explain to you what it was like? I was in London one night with Kerry and another executive, Trevor Kennedy, and we were actually offering money to the West Indies cricketers, who were great cricketers, to come and join World Series cricket. And you think, this is amazing. I'm in London and we're offering these amazing players sums of money and a future, a glittering career to come and work for us. It was very heady and very exciting. So I think if you're going to work for anybody, try and choose an entrepreneur, because they're big, they think big, they have big ideas, and sometimes you just go along for the ride and the big idea works. But the key factor was that Kerry made sure the key executives were behind him and with him all the way. So we brought all the other people with us. And that's very important when you're implementing change.
I think people also underappreciate, how much of an impact that had today. Like 2020 cricket would have never been born. The big T20 leagues we see. You you talk about change, and at the time, and people, if they see the documentary movie, would understand. A lot of the cricket traditionalists were against you and trying to bring World Series down. How did you all cope with that? With people trying to take you down?
Yeah, we certainly upset a lot of people. There was a photographer in London from whom I used to buy significant numbers of coloured film for the Australian Women's Weekly. And so I had to do the programs for the cricket. And so when I was looking for photographs of the various world cricketers, I rang this man up that I'd worked with for years, and really we were a significant payer for his property. And I said, look, I need some headshots of the West Indies and the British players and so on. Oh, no, he said in his best British voice. No, 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 we're not going to sell to you. Your Mr. Packer has upset us. And besides which, he said, my father's a member of Lord's, and Lord's is a hallowed cricket ground in London. And I couldn't get this man to sell me any photographs. So we had to sort of think around it. We got them in the end. But they were that upset that this man would not send me photographs. And the British were particularly upset because Mr. Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch, had went over and bought the London Times. And what with Kerry and the cricket and Rupert and the Times, they thought the colonials were coming for a takeover. And they didn't expect that from us colonials. But I think Australia was flagging that we'd come of age and we were taking charge of our own destiny. And Rupert buying the London Times and Kerry introducing World Series cricket was just part of the change that's happened in our country. No doubt because we're much more multicultural now than British-based.
A very transformational time. You mentioned about working for the Packers, and also you mentioned about Mr. Murdoch. You went from working for Mr. Packer to the Murdochs. What was that transition like?
It was not easy because I'd gone from a company, Consolidated Press, the Packer company, where women were valued and given top jobs, to one where women were treated with suspicion. There were no women in the hierarchy at News Limited, the Murdoch company, until I got there. So I was the first woman director of News Limited in Australia, and I was the first woman in Australia to ever edit a major metropolitan newspaper, the Daily and Sunday Telegraphs. So I was in unknown territory. And the staff were not particularly welcoming to me in the beginning. I mean, they felt that editing newspapers was a man's job. What would a woman know about editing newspapers? And here is the test. Well, I mean, of course, I was a bit nervous and a bit apprehensive, because you always are when you take on a new job. And this was a huge job. This was a huge, huge job. And I'd taken myself out of my comfort zone to see how far I could go. And so I know that the staff resented me, but I just thought, well, here's an obstacle. The staff don't really want a woman boss, you know, but I'm not going away. I'm here to stay. So you look at obstacles and you think, well, there's a way around it. And the way around it was sales, because in business, sales is the name of the game.
Yeah.
And so the Sunday Telegraph, we particularly worked hard on the Sunday Telegraph because our rival newspaper here in Sydney, the Sun Herald, outsold us quite significantly. But during my time as editor-in-chief, we finally passed them. And we've never gone, and the paper has never gone backwards. It's always stayed ahead of them. And it was hard work, and it was bringing the staff with me, again, by showing them that I wasn't going to be deterred by their unfriendliness or the being left out of meetings or being hissed at when I walked through the fourth floor. No, none of that was going to deter me. I had a job. Rupert had told me to feminize the newspapers. He thought they were too blokey. They had too much sport. And so that's what I set about doing. And as I said, the sales finally started to go up, up, up. And that really is the secret of it all. So I had a job to do, you know, change the newspapers, make them more acceptable to women. And that's what I did. News for Women used to be buried down the back of the paper.
Yeah.
So I worked forward. So even an exciting breakthrough in breast cancer could have been relegated to the back pages. And then, and this is so classic, given the success of the Matildas at the World Cup.
Yeah.
Women's sport was really negligible, really. And I became patron of the New South Wales Women's Cricket Association during this time, and they couldn't find any sponsors. No one would sponsor them because women's sport really hadn't hit the radar yet. So I went around, I just thought we need to do more with women's sport. So I went around to the sports editor, his name was, we called him Cookie, and I said, Cookie, I need a page on Sunday for women's sport. Well, he was absolutely horrified. You would have thought I was suggesting we have a page of porn or something terrible. And I said, look at it this way, Cookie, you can either give me the page or I'll take it. I mean, after all, I was the editor-in-chief. I said, I want a page every Sunday on women's sport. And that's how the Sunday Telegraph started covering women's sport. And now look at the success of women's sport. Who would not cover women's sports? It's just captivated the nation, hasn't it?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure all our young listeners would be delighted to hear that, and everyone in this room was watching the game against Denmark with great interest, and we hope the Matildas can win, and we thank you for your service for bringing attention to Australian women's sport. On the note of the ABC, I will hand over to co-presenter Nikki Jenkins, a student at PLC in Perth.
Ita, why is it important for the ABC to maintain independence from the government when dealing with political pressures on the national broadcaster? And how do they aim to do this to limit or reduce political tensions?
Well, I think Australians have the right to a free media, independent from political interference, if we can put it that way, and commercial pressure. I mean, we have a lot of commercial pressures on it. We are competitive, and our commercial competitors don't always like our results. You know, we do quite well. We've got a very wonderful website. You know, we've got terrific news online, and our competitors often complain about this. But I think it's crucial to Australians' democracy that we have a free and independent national broadcaster that reaches Australians wherever they live, and Australians of all persuasions. And I think free media is something we should never take for granted. The research shows us that those countries that do not have a free, independent national broadcaster, like we enjoy in Australia, like they have in Canada, like they have in the UK, democracy is not as vibrant as it is. And it's important for democracy that we have a national broadcaster that's free and independent from political interference. And I think we have an obligation to Australians to provide this service, and we strive to be impartial, and sometimes we're criticised and they say, and our critics say we're not. But I think we are, you know, and I think people often only listen to the ABC in certain areas, like they might listen in Melbourne CBD and Sydney CBD, but we are right around Australia. We have news 24/7 in all parts of Australia, you know, in the Northern Territory, over there in Albany, in Western Australia, over here, over there in Queensland, up in the Daintree, you name it, the ABC is there delivering news. And I was in the Hunter region of New South Wales just before Christmas, and an old bloke from the country said to me, I learn everything about the world by listening to the ABC News. And I think that is quite true for most Australians.
That's absolutely right. And it really does reinforce the pillars of democracy within Australian society. In recent years, there have been debates about media ownership concentration and its impact on diversity of voices in the media landscape. What is your perspective on this issue, and what can be done to address it?
Well, yes, it is true that, you know, that commercial media outlets are, I suppose we could say, losing ground, and some of the ownership is more concentrated, and they are under financial stress, just like everybody is who's running a business these days. Well, most businesses are. But, you know, the media is an expensive business, and this has been particularly felt for commercial interests in rural and regional Australia, which is why the ABC, of course, has a very important role to do. And we are very committed to regional and remote areas. And we have actually enlarged our coverage of those areas with the withdrawal of the commercial outlets, because Australians, wherever they live, need to be able to access the news. But, you know, we too are under cost pressures. I mean, the cost of living is high for all Australians at the moment. Electricity charges go up. You know, we look at the lights that are on, and I'm looking at the lights up in my ceiling, and, you know, we think we have a very hefty television bill. And, you know, delivering content 24/7 is an expensive operation. It's expensive for us and it's expensive for our commercial competitors. But our commercial competitors are reliant on advertising, so commercial advertising. So if that dries up, then they have a problem. And then they often have to make decisions based on their figures. Fortunately, the government expects us to deliver content to Australians wherever they live. So we are able to fill the gaps left vacant by our commercial competitors.
What approaches does the ABC take in order to keep their programs current, diverse, and inclusive? We
have a framework for diversity in our content plan, and then when we commission for diversity and inclusion. We have diversity and inclusion guidelines, and we're very conscious of being, you know, we're reflecting the Australian society as it is. And people may have noticed a difference taking place in the ABC with more diverse representation of people. You know, they come along. We make programs that indicate the sort of support we give. I'm thinking about First Day here out west, Total Control, Mystery Road, Love on the Spectrum, which was about love among people with autism, and just really beautiful. You can't ask that. Old people's homes for 4-year-olds, reflecting the loneliness of elderly people of all colours, of all skin colours in Australia. And I mean, we are really committed to showing the diverse content of Australian society in our storytelling, and we work very hard to deliver that.
What has been your greatest challenge as ABC chairperson or within working in the media industry?
Every day is a challenge at the ABC, I must tell you, but I think COVID. You know, COVID was something we'd never encountered.
Yeah, absolutely.
It changed the workplace. I don't think the workplace will ever go back to the way that it was. I'm not sure we'll ever go back to the 5-day working week. But to keep the ABC operational during COVID, when so many of the staff were not here, were not, you know, in the main place where we do our storytelling, we had to isolate the news area. The news area looked like an isolation ward. You know, do not enter if you don't have a pass. We had an A team and a B team. So if anything happened to the A team of news reporters, we had the B team in another isolated area who could step in and do it. And then it was a miracle, really. We all discovered virtual everything, virtual meetings, virtual presentations. Suddenly News Breakfast could have a guest on virtually. And in a sense, we've all embraced that way of working. And look, we're doing this right now with this virtual sort of hookup that we're having. And it's shown us that there are other ways of delivering work and delivering news and information. But it wasn't easy. And then we were very concerned about the staff that did actually attract COVID. And then always at the back of our minds, we deliver emergency services in Australia for bushfires, for floods, for, you know, other catastrophes. What if something like that had to be covered? How would we do it? Some of our reporters did have to work during these COVID shutdowns. And it was a great challenge, you know, wearing masks, you know, keeping isolated, I just think it was such an unknown. And really, I think the whole of Australia learned how to do things differently. And it was possibly the biggest change agent any of us have ever encountered. And it's changed the workplace and the way we work forever.
Ita, how does the ABC manage information integrity and bias in the age of social media and fake news?
It's very challenging. I mean, social media is a law unto itself, but we have guardrails in place to ensure that we are independent, that we're non-biased, that we're transparent, that we're well governed. And we expect our staff to follow those guidelines. I mean, they're reminded of them on a regular basis. And if you don't follow the guidelines, there are warnings issued. And we've got a code of code of conduct, and we've got editorial policies which all staff receive and are encouraged to read. We work very hard to make sure that we can deliver this kind of content, whatever it might be, to our audiences wherever they are.
Thank you, Ita. I will now pass on to my co-host Xavier.
Hi, Ida. I'm a long-time follower, reader, and also I just constantly look at ABC News, and having lots of family members that also read and follow ABC News, I'm excited for the expansion and development of ABC News into more regional areas and places across Australia, even in Alice Springs where I've been, and I've seen people who have read and looked at ABC News, and it's created a general positive movement in the community. I'd like to ask what the future of ABC-based journalism in Western Australia might look like over the next coming few years or decades.
Pretty positive, I'd say. I was just looking up here. We maintain 8 regional multi-hub bureaus, one in Albany, Broome, Bunbury, Esperance, Geraldton, Kalgoorlie, Karratha, and Kununurra. And of course, we have our WA newsroom in Perth. So we're as committed as we ever have been to serving our audiences in Perth and WA generally. And recently there was some controversy about an announcement that had been made that we might be considering a national news on a Sunday night and cancelling our state bulletins. And that caused a lot of comment in WA. But we always listen to audience feedback. And we could see that the feedback on this particular idea was not well received. And so we won't be doing a national bulletin. The state bulletins will remain in place. And that includes WA. We've got a pitch into the WA government about a proposal of us working together more closely that we hope will be well received by the Premier. But of course, Premiers receive proposals from people all the time. And not every proposal gets up. But I'm a great lover of Western Australia. It's one of my favourite places. I first went to West Australia in 1975, and I just was knocked out. I just thought it was such a beautiful place. And since then, I've been to most parts. I've been down as far as Albany, and I've been all the way up to Kununurra and right up through the archipelago to Indonesia. And I just think more Australians should travel to WA. I'm always shocked at the number of people who from the eastern states who don't ever go to Perth or Kalgoorlie or Fremantle or any of those. Broome. You think, what's the matter with them? Why don't they want to see their own country? So we're very supportive of Western Australia, and we love being there. We've recently increased the number of journalists working in our newsrooms and certainly in our regional areas. And we see a vibrant future for the West Australian audiences and also the ABC alongside.
Speaking about the growth of journalism and the increase of journalism in places in Australia and this fantastic growth of the ABC, we've got a lot of students, particularly at Scotch College, that are interested in political journalism, and also schools around the state and around the country. And what opportunities might students find at the ABC post-school if interested in journalism?
Well, we have a cadet course, so we have a cadetship program. We have an ABC training program. We have ABC internships, and in fact, I've just had lunch, a sandwich lunch, I hasten to say, in the boardroom with 5 researchers from universities around Australia who are spending a week here as interns at Radio National. And because they're academics, and so they're learning how to do presentations, how to speak on radio if they have to be interviewed, how to cut to the point, how to grab the listener's attention. And it was really interesting to hear, first of all, about their work, and then to learn what they were going to be doing with the skills we're trying to teach them during their week with us. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Because academics are not taught to speak on radio or to be interviewed. And so we're teaching them those skills. So we have those kinds. We have all sorts of internships, but that was one that's just stuck in my mind. The news cadetship is a 12-month program. It's a paid program. You get paid while you go through it. And there are opportunities in every state and in every territory for people that are interested, so get in touch with the ABC. You'll find us online and explore your opportunities. We're very keen to train young people in journalism and other areas of content making at the ABC.
I hope a lot of students look into that at Scotch College and also schools around the country, and a lot of students will take up those opportunities, which is really awesome. And also with this new age of journalism, which we've sort of expanded on before and had a look at with fake news, especially being a part of a government-funded program. As a tool, how do ABC programs such as News keep reporting actions of the Australian government transparent and independent for its readers?
Just while we're on that other subject about learning, we work with educational organisations as well. So anyone that's interested in coming here could check with whatever university or educational campus they're on about their connections with the ABC. It's worth exploring. Now, what was your next question?
Oh, it was with regards to the ABC programs such as News keeping reporting actions of the Australian government transparent and independent for its readers.
Well, I think I answered it in the earlier question. We have to be impartial. We have to report. We do hold the government to account. We're interested in public interest journalism. That sometimes upsets governments, but it's really without fear or favour. So, I mean, if you find something that's not quite right within government, we have we report on it. That is what a free, independent media does in a democracy. We never report without all the safeguards. We take legal advice. We think through the ramifications of some of the things we uncover. Some stories we find by ourselves, some we find through whistleblowers, but you can't not report on them just because it happens to be, or it might involve a government department. Wherever there's a wrongdoing that comes to our attention, if it's, depending on what it is, and Four Corners has broken a lot of stories, for instance, and our investigative journalism often uncovers all sorts of scandals that would never be uncovered at all without the ABC. I mean, there'd be no Royal Commission into aged care without the ABC. That was something that a report, an investigation by the ABC uncovered, the appalling conditions in our aged care facilities and how aged care older people were being treated. So that is one of the roles of a national broadcaster, public interest journalism. And public interest journalism says it all, public interest. If we think the story is going to be of interest to the public, we will follow it.
Well, also, as a child, when I was a young boy, I used to watch ABC Kids programs, and I used to watch all of the shows. And looking into it with ABC, all of these new ABC children's programs coming out, Bluey, which has not only reached the connection with audiences of children, but also adults, and other ABC Kids programs becoming so large, how a large portion of these young Australians watch with these ABC children's programs, and how the development of these programs and these the streaming of these helping and supporting the youth of Australia.
Well, we use the same guidelines as we use for any program that we make. We program specifically for children. What would they be interested in? We talk to children. We have play school. We have children that come in. We look at what they're interested in. We have children or we have grandchildren. We have both. And so, the same rules that apply to any content that we make is it right for the audience? Is it going to entertain them? Is it going to inform them? We do educational programs for children. The interesting thing about Bluey, which is now a global success, I don't think it's the first global success of an Australian character that we've ever enjoyed. But I was in the post office queuing up to get something, and I heard one man behind me say to the other, I've learned a lot about fatherhood through Bluey. And you think, really? Really? I couldn't wait to get back to tell everybody here that I heard a man saying he learned a lot about fatherhood from Bluey. So that you never know what a little dog can do. But it's no different programming for children than it is for adults. We look for programs that will appeal to them, that will work for them, that will do all the things that will make them want to watch, that will make them want to come back and have a look again. The rules don't change just because of your age. And we have a duty really to provide programs to Australians of all ages, even toddlers, teenagers, you name it. We try and deliver it.
Thank you. It looks like we have an extra few minutes, so I'd like to pass on to Adil. Cader. He has a few other questions.
We have a few submitted in questions. I like your point you raised there about Bluey and the international audience, and a lot of my American friends learned about cricket through the recent cricket episode on Bluey. But on the note of traveling, I know you spent some time in New York. You mentioned about your time in London, and I'm sure you do a lot of work with counterparts in the UK and Canada. How has traveling helped your career?
Well, I think it broadens your knowledge, and it broadens your interests. And I've worked in London. I actually worked in London on a British magazine, and I learned a lot about publishing, which was what I was doing then. Publishing, why magazines are put together the way they are, how you promote what you're doing, and I always thought it was sort of like my finishing school of publishing. But everything to do with travel just broadens your mind. I mean, you see, if you go to New York, for instance, it's a city that is full of ideas. I only have to walk down the street and I think, oh, what's that, I wonder? You have to be curious if you're a journalist, and I am by profession a journalist. So I've never lost my curiosity. So I'm thinking, why is that? What are they doing over there? You go to a bookshop, they still have books in New York. And you see a book that you'd never see in Australia, and you think, oh, that looks really interesting. And you think, oh, it is really interesting. I'm going to get that book. I'm going to take it home and read it. So I think it's what they say, traveling broadens your mind. You're able to go to art museums. You're able to experience new people, new points of view, all of which is good to challenge yourself. We're still fairly isolated here in Australia. Sure, the internet has connected us in ways that we never enjoyed in the past, but it's still a bit of a hike to get to Australia. So when you go overseas and you mix with other people, you hear other views, and they make you think, and it challenges your thinking. So you just see different perspective on the news. You can look at the news coverage in America, and you can look at the news coverage in the UK, you can look at it in France, or even Greece or Italy, and you see different perceptions of news. And then you come home and you see that we have another perception of news. And all of these things broaden your thinking and broaden your knowledge.
Definitely, I can definitely relate to that, having traveled and the importance of having to see different perspectives. We're into our final question, and Nikki's got a question she's looking forward to asking.
Yeah, Ida, being one of the few women on various boards where you served, could you share some strategies you took to ensure that your voice was heard? And what advice would you give to young women today looking to make a mark in corporate leadership?
Well, first of all, you're entitled to be wherever you want to be. And whether you're a man or a woman or a man, you should never let your gender stop you from achieving anything. And we all have dreams. We all know deep inside us, I think, what we want to do. But we often let people talk us out of those dreams. Don't let them do it, because it's your dream and it's your ambition. And you shouldn't let anyone talk you out of trying to achieve your dream. You may not achieve it, but it's worth having a go at it. And I've just always thought that I was entitled to make the most of whatever talents I had. And even though I wasn't sometimes welcome, as I've told you, I've just thought, well, I'm not going away. I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to have a go at this.
Those are all the questions that we have for you today, Ida. We would like to extend our thanks to you for giving up your time to talk to us today. And we would also like to thank Adil and his collaboration within this podcast.
Ida, thank you so much for your time. We've been looking forward to this podcast for quite a while. We appreciate your insightful answers to our young audience, and I especially loved hearing about your experience with World Series cricket.
Thank you, Ida, and thank you, Adil, and thank you to our viewers who watched our episode today. And please check out Adil's podcast, Talking Foreign Affairs.
I'd just like to thank you very much, and I've really enjoyed talking with you all and answering your questions, and I hope I've made you or persuaded you all to come and work for the ABC at one time or another.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ida.
Thank you.
All the best.